Welcome to Moving Forward, conversations on culture, identity, healing, and hope. I'm your host, Linda Anderson, and I created this podcast as a space for real, heartfelt conversations with people who are reflecting, evolving, and boldly stepping into what's next. This podcast was born out of my own journey through seasons of loss, transition, and transformation, and my belief that healing happens when we come together to share our stories. My hope is that these conversations will inspire you to pause, reflect, and find courage as you move forward in your own life. Today's guest is someone whose work has shaped how educators and organizations and communities think about learning through story, service, and shared voice. I'm honored to welcome Cathryn Berger Kaye, president of CBK Associates, internationally recognized author, consultant, and thought leader in service learning, youth engagement, school culture, and a 21st century competencies. Cathryn's work spans public, independent, and international schools, global organizations, and leadership teams. She is a strong believer in the power of books that relate to all different subject matters to connect students and community, helping learners of all ages connect emotionally and intellectually to their learning. Through her work, she invites teams to listen deeply, elevate every voice, and move from intention to meaningful action. I first met Cathryn years ago at a service learning conference in Minneapolis. It was an experience that opened my own lens. Since then, I've encouraged educators and leaders to see service not as an add-on, but as a powerful process for connection, growth, and hope. Today, we will explore Cathryn's journey, how story and service shape identity and culture, and how service learning can empower people, whether they work in education, the public sector, or the private sector, and to move forward with purpose. Cathryn, I cannot thank you enough. Welcome to Moving Forward.
Thank you, Linda. It's a joy to be with you.
So here's a first question I have for you. So before you became known for service learning and connected learning, you had your own professional journey. Can you take us back to your early career? What drew you into this work, and what were you curious about as a young professional?
Well, thank you, Linda, for all the thought you put into this. My first teaching job was in a one-room schoolhouse in rural Maine. There was a, a surplus of teachers in the market in Boston where I was living. So I ended up in this school that was quite unique, really relied on the community of people in that area for the students to thrive. So it really felt very different than a normal, quote, school where I was living at the time in Boston. At the time, I was not quite sure what education even meant. I mean, I had a teaching degree, but this was new. So I was, like many new teachers, a deer caught in the headlights most of the time.
Yeah.
Fortunately for me, there were two big things that happened. One, I was influenced by the two of the founders of the school, George and Mabel Dennison. George wrote the book The Lives of Children, which was a classic in progressive education at the time. He was a writer and documented the work of his wife, Mabel, in how she taught in New York City schools. They founded the school, and they really impacted what I thought about learning and what I really saw. Mabel was a character. She used to say to me all the time, "Stop with the lesson plans, listen to the children." That's what she said, literally. And George would come in and say, "Where's the chaos?" He was looking for the creative chaos. I had no clue what that meant, either thing, until Dutch elm disease hit the community. And the kids came in and they said, "Our trees are dying." Now, I didn't know an oak from an elm, so I was worthless, right? But they knew. And so I said to them, "What do you want to do?" Which was the best thing I could have ever asked. And I think that's under asked for kids, in a classroom. What do you want to do? Not to what do I want to do? And I think at that moment I understood what Mabel meant about stopping with the lesson plans and listening to the children and letting the organic chaos of learning, of excitement, of personal drive kick in. And our older students were able to go out with college students to actually graph and measure and assess the trees in the community. The younger kids posted tree poems all over the town. I mean, there was a whole process of learning that interfaced with everyone else. And I saw that inner motivation of kids I hadn't seen yet. I thought, oh, this is what learning is. It's about it's about authenticity, it's about curiosity, and it's about making change. And that's what did it. It's before the term service learning ever came close to me, because that term, as we know, it came in the mid 80s. But this was in the, this was before that in the 70s, actually.
So I don't know who's listening right now, but I'm telling you, I'm already inspired. And everyone, I'm not sure if everyone knows, but I've retired as an administrator, but I'm already getting this inspiration of, oh my gosh, I want to teach again. And that's what you do because all the, you said the word authenticity and, oh, I just want to go back and inspire these kids, their voice.
Yeah.
So as you did move through those early years, what did you begin to notice, though, about the students, the educators, or even organizations that shape the direction your work would eventually take?
I noticed that young people really want to do things.
Mm,
They notice what's going on in the world and they want to be involved. They don't want to wait. They have ideas and energy and curiosity and they want to participate. I think the reluctance is from educators because I think we use the wrong language when we educate teachers on how to be educators. And I'll give
mhm,
you an example of what I mean. Words really matter. Words have power, and language creates culture. So when we emphasize in teacher education programs in a school, we look at classroom behavior, student behavior as an emphasis. We talk about control and manage. We talk about behavior management and classroom management, and that those these are the wrong words because when I do my workshops or interface with schools as I do, I often ask who in the room wants to be managed. Not one hand goes, oh, sometimes one hand, but nobody wants to be managed. No one wants to be controlled. So if we change the language, we change the environment. So I talk about classroom engagement rather than classroom management. So if students are engaged, they don't need to be managed. If they're inspired, they don't need to be controlled. And these are root issues in a school. These change the climate, they change the ways school operate, the ways teachers even interface with each other, the way leadership works with teachers. So I think we have to really look at some of these very foundational principles that we use in order to shift the narrative and
mhm.
give students a voice.
Yeah.
And I think we have to go beyond voice. Also, I will mention we talk a lot about student voice. It needs to be voice and choice. We need to let them take
Mm,
initiative, have voice, and have choice.
mhm.
I have millions of examples of that, but I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah. So, at what point, though, did your work begin to feel less like a job and more like a calling, something that connected to purpose, your values, impact? At what point do you feel that that happened?
I think there were two key points. One was early work that I did in what we now call anti-bias education. That early work really influenced how I see the world and how I listen and how I learn from others. I think that was very critical. And then I was developing a leadership program for students in the early 80s. I was working for a nonprofit organization called the Constitutional Rights Foundation. And I realized that you cannot be leader in a vacuum. You have to be a leader of something worthwhile. That's when I start connecting leadership with service in my work and inspiring young people to engage other young people in finding community issues that they cared about and learning about them, and then with community taking action. And that was the moment I thought, oh, that's it. And it did take me back to Maine and the elm trees also, the
Mhm.
Dutch elm. I saw that this is how learning happens, and this is really the work I'm here to do in that respect.
And you're currently writing your third edition to your service learning book, but can you talk a little bit about your books and what they, they're there for people to use? I know I used it all the time. Can you talk a little bit about your books?
But I have to start with my first book, Linda, that you may not even know about. So I'm going to tell you
Oh,
about my first book first.
yeah, that's what I meant. Yes.
Yeah, but I have a book before. So my very
Oh,
first book was I wrote in the 80s. It was called WordWorks: Why the Alphabet is a Kid's Best Friend.
mm-hmm.
That book is still one of my very favorites. I wrote it because a 9-year-old boy told me he was burnt out on writing. which was priceless. And I thought, okay, so what are we doing that getting a kid to be burned out on writing by age 9? So it's a book about the joy of learning, and it's a book to inspire the joy in writing in all of us. It was in print for a very long time. Little Brown was a publisher, and Cambridge University Press did an edition. I still love that book. So if any of the listeners can find that a used copy, it's so much fun. There's only one little section that dates it that says computers are coming. But besides that, it's really a wonderful book for kids, and I still stand by it as as priceless. And I still love doing writing workshops. Um, the Complete Guide to Service Learning is kind of my major work, and it's now going to be in a third edition in 2027. So you could still enjoy the second edition. The third one is almost like volume three rather than because I keep adding to it, but it's still the other books are also relevant. It was just time. My publisher thought it was time to refresh. And I agree because so much has changed in the last 15 years when it came out. There's so many different topics in the world we want to address. There's so much, we know so much more about the world. You know, we know more about the environment. We know more about immigration. We know more about hunger and being unhoused. And so I wanted to update all those topics because the book includes an overview of service learning. And then there's 12 thematic chapters. So if a teacher says our kids care about older adults and elders in our community, it gives you a blueprint on what to do, how to take action, examples of what other teachers and kids have done, and literature, books, fiction, nonfiction, and picture books you can read to get kids understanding the underside, the foundational issues related to those topics. So part of me updating the book was reading 250 or 300 books in the last 6 weeks.
Mm.
I've been busy reading, Linda, when I'm not doing
Yeah.
other things. It's kind of been like reading, writing, and cooking. That's what I've been doing, uh, working on this edition. And then I also interview authors. I've interviewed uh, by now probably 45 authors about why they've written their books. So that's part of the story. That's part of the digital content. There's a book, digital content, lots of resources for teachers. So I still love edition, my second edition, and I'll be very excited when the third one comes out. But it's a process to write a book. I get in voices from other people who've
Mhm.
been very instrumental in the field. So I have 18 experts chiming in with essays. It's a real production.
And it's a I know I had the first and second edition and very powerful. And I think for anybody to see, whether you are in education or just, working in private sector, there's a lot in there that you can use to do step by step, like you said. So very empowering to me too. Um,
Well, I do a lot. I do work, just so you know, in the private sector.
right,
I've consulted with governments and with
right,
businesses, and when I come in and do workshops, I still draw from many of
yes,
these same ideas when I work with adults
right.
on for a different purpose or different outcomes. So these are just universal constructs I've been able to develop and use.
Absolutely. You're talking about books. You are a strong advocate, like I said in the intro, about the power of books across, I'm saying grade levels, but I think across anywhere, just the power of books, period. Why is such a story, any story, such a powerful entry point for learning? That's number one. But then, especially when we want students and adults to connect emotionally, ethically, and intellectually.
Books capture our imagination. It ignites so much in, I guess, even our cellular matter. I mean,
Mm,
books are just people say they take you I mean, there's so many things I could say that many of us already know. Books take us places we've never been or may never be. Books put us in situations that we may never be in either. There's this wonderful book about a fish where you're suddenly swimming with a fish, or you're in a hospital with a young man who's people think he's on life support, but his mind is very active. Uh, we're in a refugee camp uh, in Kenya that is dire for these young people, but we see their joy and their hope amidst even that environment. Books inform us about what matters to people we may never know.
mm.
And like you said before, the stories, so much about stories is, you were correct, instrumental in my work. When students get to know people in the community and their stories, they feel a part of the community. Otherwise, we feel a distance from the person we walk by down the street. It's better to know the stories. And books do that. I am such a strong advocate of inspiring every child to find the book that's right for them. And when I do workshops and meet with teachers, and I say the same thing to your listeners, if anybody's having trouble finding a book that connects with a student, just email me. I'll help you find the book. I'll help you find a book for. I want every kid to enjoy and thrive with reading. I was so excited the other night. I had a small gathering at my house for family, and my granddaughter just needed a little space and went in another room. And I have stacks of books everywhere, as you can imagine.
Of course.
She just picked up a book and just sat there and was reading. It was like, oh my gosh, she is a reader, and I love that when kids find words as comfort, as a home. And they're
Mhm.
books that connect with every subject. People always think what they should be reading in English class, but there's novels that are rich in science, and there's books in history that you can read, novels, fiction, nonfiction. I think we need to really mix it up, and picture books are right for everybody. I remember showing a picture book to someone. She said, "Oh, I'm giving it to a friend of mine who's a judge." Of course you are, because picture books are for everyone, and they're not always for little kids. Sometimes they're for
Exactly.
teenagers or administrators. So I think we have to really dive into books. I know reading is on a real downslide. I mean, all the statistics are in that people aren't reading for pleasure anymore. I like to watch a series on TV at night also, but reading really is a different part of our life experience. So find a book. And if you need any references, find someone like me or a great librarian. Every librarian's a gift
Mhm.
to us. Find librarians to help you find the right book for you. But I'm glad to volunteer.
And it keeps your brain functioning too.
Oh,
For
it does. And
yes.
I mean, I'm not suggesting you read 250 books like I did in the last 6 weeks. People said, "Did you really do it?" I said, "Yes, I really did." Um, Not at that speed. I have to slow myself down after I go through one of those reading sprints. But authors are amazing. And when I first started collecting books on social justice themes in the 80s, there were very few books. It was very hard to find them.
Yeah.
Now there are more than I could handle. And and the writers that people are publishing are from a much first diverse part of the universe. They're diverse in every possible way. So we're getting voices on print, on paper, that we didn't have access to before.
Mm.
Writers from all over the world. I wish I could connect with publishers all over the world. That's a little bit harder for me. But I know all over the world there's amazing publishers with amazing writers. So that's also part of my next journey is finding all those.
That's interesting what you said about the social justice books or that have increased since the 80s. That would be a great topic or discussion to have with youth, I feel, high school kids or of the why, maybe in college kids even. Why do they think? Why do they get their opinion of why are we seeing this increase? I just wanted to throw that out there. That was a
Yeah.
good comment. You,
Oh, I do want to mention
yeah,
I've written also
sure.
2 books with Philippe Cousteau, Jacques Cousteau's grandson, on the
Oh,
environment.
okay, yeah,
So Make a Splash is for little kids. It just
right.
came in its second edition about a year ago. And Going Blue for older teens, middle and high school. These are great books to get kids to become stewards of the planet. So I
Hmm.
just want you to just add that to your must-have bookshelf.
Definitely. Thank you for saying that because when this drops, this interview, there'll be an interview following about when you say with students, with the environment, another group of students will be talking about their project. So it does empower these kids to look at their environment and what can they do to help. So, Cathryn, let me ask you this. You do such powerful work, you said it, with not just education, but with leadership teams. What does true listening look like in a collaborative work, in collaborative space? And why is it essential to meaningful change?
We all know why listening is hard, right? Listening is a challenge. Very often when we aim to be listening, we're already thinking about what we want to say in response, and it interferes with listening. True listening is so deep to really listen. So I've been exploring that construct for some time, what it really means to listen. So I'll share a little bit about what I bring to that. Um, I've been a fan of Chinese philosophy for a long time. Started studying Tai Chi in my 20s, and it's just, again, just something that I carry within myself. So I did study Chinese language a long time ago for a while, and I fell in love with Chinese characters because they tell a story, the classic Chinese characters. So, for example, the Chinese character of trust is made up of two characters. The first character is a person, and the second character is a word. So, trust is a person standing by their word. It's pretty lovely. So, when I was
Mhm.
looking at the whole concept of listening, I looked at the Chinese character to listen. It's made up of five characters. So, get ready. So, to listen is made up of an ear, 10 eyes, undivided attention. I know already well. A
Yeah.
heart, one heart, and king.
Mm.
So what I do when I do workshops is I have people get in groups of five, and each person is that character. They make up the character. Like Linda, you would be the heart. I might be the king. And someone else would be, and I have them talk about what each of those things, heart, 10 eyes, ear, undivided attention. What did I leave out? And king, whatever. What those five things have to do with listening. It's very transformative when people think of that because
Hmm.
listening is so much more than what we do with our ears. It's what we do with our bodies, with our heart, with all of us. And I'm going to try, I didn't know I was going to be asked this specifically, so I don't have it in front of me. But I'm going to try and repeat what the Chinese character etymology tells us, that the ears and eyes hear the tones. Wait, what is it? The ears hear the tones, while 10 eyes look out for the body language. And the king of listening lies with one heart of undivided attention to listen to the unspoken thoughts.
Wow.
I know. So well. So this is what I think about when I go to leadership with listening is how do we really listen? And I do that in so many different groups. And I remember doing it at a school in Chiang Mai in Thailand. And it changed the it changed everything for about 180 people in the room.
Hmm.
And people said listening is hard. It is true listening.
Hmm.
I mentioned, before we are talking that word authentic listening. Really listening requires us to be present, which means to stop, which means to make space, which
Hmm.
means to anoint the other person with what they deserve, which is our full attention, our presence and that whole thing. So I still work on listening every single day. I work at it.
Hmm.
And my one of my daughters used to say to me, Mom, all the time, Mom, just listen to me. I mean, she taught me more listening skills than anybody. But I'll be practicing listening for my whole life. I think it's that kind of an art. The art of listening is really deep, and I think we have to do that in order to let other people in, to be vulnerable, and to really show that we care.
Mhm. I completely agree. And it's one of my hardest things because my brain, the minute someone starts talking, I'm already thinking of the next thing I want to say.
Exactly.
And I'm not really actively listening. So I
It's
appreciate it.
yeah, I think one of the things I've learned about doing all this reading lately is in order to do that, I had to really kind of center myself
Yeah.
or focus myself in that moment. And that's really helped me in the last when I've done this before, read that many books, it really helps me kind of say, okay, everything else has to just disappear. Make space to
Hmm.
be now. And when some of us from the 60s know you'll be here now, that was the whole thing. But we're still working at it, Linda. You and I, we're still going to
Yes.
work at it.
Absolutely. I like though the heart because when you're an active listener, your heart is so engaged and
Right.
and the 10 eyes is what
Yeah.
you said, right?
Ten.
Yes, that is so true. Yeah. So can I ask you though, how do your strategies help teams move from compliance? Okay, so
Oh,
we all have to be in compliant to consensus. Well, compliance and consensus, we're there. But how do we move to shared ownership? And here's the other big thing is collective voice.
I was asked years ago by this fabulous educator in Africa, actually, he ran the Association of International Schools in Africa, Peter. He asked me to give a talk on my best idea yet.
Mm,
I worked on this for a year. About 9 months, I couldn't come up with it. And then all of a sudden, I remember 3 months before I had to give the talk, I knew what it was on. And I think I gave one of the best talks of my life. It was only 12 minutes. He did them like little short TED Talk things. And it was on blank space. It's what we don't have as educators. We
mm,
fill every moment. We fill every moment. Every moment's got to be planned and purposed. And I wish there was more purpose, actually. Just plan, 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 plan. There can't be any room for the unknown. And this is a real hazard in authentic learning, in my opinion, that we have to have blank space. We have to have room for a shift. I think the problem in education is we're overly goal oriented.
mm.
Now, I don't have a problem with people setting goals or personal goals, but in an academic situation, a goal can have us be so directed to an endpoint that we forget that the process is curvy and it can be messy. And the goal for Joe may not be the same goal for Susie or Fred or Jeff. And so we have to be adaptive. We talk about that some, but we don't actually work at it in the same way.
Hmm.
So I go back to what Mabel said to me, stop with the lesson plans and listen to the children. That we have to give space in what we create for what we don't know what will happen yet. You know, if I were back in the classroom, Linda, we were talking earlier about that just before we got on air about being back in the classroom.
Hmm.
If I was back in the classroom, I know I would struggle, but I would do my very best to not know all the answers before I walked in the room.
Hmm.
If I know all the answers already, I cut off the student's journey for authentic learning.
Hmm.
And then I don't get surprised either. I want learning to be filled with surprises. I want to go in and, like I said with the kids about the Dutch elm disease, I don't know this air. I don't know one tree from another. What are we going to do about it? What are we going to learn about it? What are our questions? That's the kind of learning I think we need more of, so that learning stems from the voice, the choices of kids. And of course, we bring our expertise and we
Yeah.
shape it. We can even, quote, manipulate it to move in certain directions. I just think we over prescribe and then we lose what's really mattering at the moment. A teacher once said to me, a student came in the classroom and said there was a fire in my neighborhood. And the kid was really upset. Now, the teacher could have said, I'm so sorry. Now let's open our textbook to page 248. Or the teacher could say, what happened? What do we need to know about this? What could we do? And meet the content or not sometimes,
Hmm.
but maybe even meet the content from page 248 through this discovery. I think we have to be more engaged with student curiosity, voice, and what's going on in the moment to make learning really valuable and stick.
I remember when I first started teaching, I was teaching third grade, very first year, and very trained to the scripted curriculum. And I had a very high achieving class. Their voice just not overpowered me, but I'm listening to their voice going, put this curriculum to the side and let them empower me and vice versa, like you said, with my expertise and hear their questions, hear their learning. So it goes to that active listening too. That helps them and myself move forward. I think as educators, we feel, oh well, we're in control, we know it all. Well, that's when we have to let go a little bit and let these children's voices, children, students, adults, whoever, really. I love what you said about listening because that's very important when you're in, whether it's education or running a company, whatever, you have to be a listener. And then you make the move of what's next. That drives you. So I appreciate that, Catherine. Thank you so much. The next question though, and it kind of pertains to what you were just saying, but in your work and in service learning, how do students learn to ask better questions about communities, systems, and themselves through a service project?
One of the things I've contributed to the world of education is a process called the MISO method. Remember that, Linda?
Yes, I do.
Um, because I was confused and I saw confusion around me about what research really is. People think research is Google and that you can Google things, but research isn't Google. Um, to re means to again, and search means to look. So to research means to look again and to add to the body of knowledge. If you just Google it, you're just plagiarizing what other people said. In fact, there's a quote from the 1930s that says, if you copy from one person, it's plagiarism. If you copy from two, it's research.
Mm.
Yeah. So
Huh.
you have to think about that. But yes. So I created a method called the MISO method of action research, which includes using, if you want to do research using media, all forms of media, not just the internet, but using photographs and maps and books, of course, and podcasts and whatever. And then interviewing and dialogue with people. So interviewing is, again, one form of asking questions and learning how to listen so that you can shape the next question based on what happened before. And then doing surveys, which is a different style of asking questions, and then observation and experience. But if we just focus for a moment on, let's say, even just surveys,
Mhm.
learning how to do a survey is a heck of a way to learn how to write questions because when I do workshops with adults on this process, the adults say, wow, my question had too much, was biased. It's like, well, yeah. I mean, I wasn't going to tell you that up front. I mean, the whole thing is you want students to go through a process of writing questions, trying them out, and then self-critiquing what and why they didn't get what they were looking for. You need students to practice asking questions in order to get there. So they understand issues of tone and and bias. And what I remember when I was studying all this and learning about it, I was doing a deep dive in this to do a whole process of we called citizens journalism when I was working with Philippe Cousteau's wonderful organization, Earth Echo. Um, there's a whole thing about doing naive questions. Those are the best questions. Have you heard that term, Linda?
No, I haven't.
I know it's fun. It's from
Yeah.
journalism. So a naive question, like you could ask a question that shows how smart you are, or you can ask a question that invites the other person in. You ask very good questions, by the way. But
Thank you.
you can ask you can ask a question like that says, okay, so if you're going diving in let's say this was after the oil spill. This is where I was working on this a lot, the oil spill in the Gulf, where you could ask a question like, so when you went to the ocean, did you see all the animals and when you saw the people who were suffering in the community, you go on and on with your question, you know what I mean? People, you've heard
Yeah.
people do that. Or you could say, what was it like at the ocean? And
Mm,
which one is really going to get to the heart of the matter and open up someone's mind and their heart and their experience and get to the story. So we want to learn
mm,
what the naive question is, not the one who makes us look like we have all the answers. So we really want kids to experience. So I think you can help them learn about the art of asking questions in gentle and kind ways so they don't get in, they feel more empowered rather than embarrassed about what they want to ask.
mhm,
And you could set up processes like the MISO method of, of research. So they learn to do interviews and they learn how to do probing questions and they learn what that concept
mhm,
means. And they can learn how to do surveys where they're getting information from different levels of people just for general information or for their expertise. So this is a critical essence of learning is learning how to ask questions. And I think you do it through practice,
mhm,
through messing up, and then that resilience and bouncing back and doing it again.
mhm. The power of yet. We're not there yet. So I appreciate you bringing that into it. It's okay to mess up. We're so afraid to do that. And then you rethink, like you said, and go back. There's so much going on in education right now. But what gives you hope when you see students and educators, and not just students and educators, but the community engaging in learning that really centers on empathy, voice, and purpose?
Well, in addition to reading all those books for my new book, I also surveyed educators I know from all over the world, literally all over the world, to find out examples of what kids are doing, stories that generate from students curiosity about the community, connecting with the curriculum in the community, going out and learning about the community, learning with the community, and engaging. And it's a big difference if you're doing things to the community. We don't do that in service learning. It's always with,
Right.
and it's always we elevate everyone together. And when I hear stories of people doing community walks in their community, for example, so they get to know the people and the places, and kids helping to construct these things, and finding that they need more jazz music in the park, and so the
Mm,
music classes go and perform jazz in the park because the kids think that would be helpful to people and the place. Or you read about a school where the kids realized they did not know the custodial staff or the very well. And so they created all these environments where they could learn with the custodial staff and the people who really keep our schools safe and productive that we don't always recognize or value. And they shifted that whole perspective with their school. And when I learn of little kids planting trees to reforest an area that was burnt down in a forest fire. All these stories give me hope because that each story means that educators are creating that space, that that what I mentioned before, that blank space, that opening for kids' voice to rise and for kids to do things that matter, to
mhm.
really learn that learning doesn't just happen in a classroom. You know, people ask me often, how do I define service learning? And my best definition is one I didn't come up with. I'm really sorry I didn't. I wish I thought of this line and I don't know the name of the person. If anybody out there knows who actually originated this quote, It's a woman I understood who lived in the Buffalo, New York region. The quote is, service learning is the fourth wall of a classroom that opens up to the world.
Oh,
This is what I think
wow.
gives me promise and hope that when learning
Mm,
extends and kids see that learning is out the window and learning is down the street and learning is connecting with people I don't know yet, and I can embrace that. When little kids, third graders in Los Angeles and West Hollywood, California, right in the Los Angeles area, learned yoga because their teacher liked yoga and they got so good at yoga they said we want to teach other people, and they created armchair yoga for the Russian immigrants at the community center down the road. Now I say, okay, these kids are going to grow up to look around them and say, this is missing here and I know how to do this. I will bring this to you. What, when I first started doing that leadership program I mentioned in the early 80s through the Constitutional Rights Foundation, there was a young man named James Sakamoto in the group. He was just wonderful. And I remember he was graduating high school. And I said to James, so what are you going to study? Hoping he'd go into some social service because that's where I thought he could make the most impact in my narrow mind at the time. And he said, oh, I'm going to study business. And part of me just went, oh, inside, oh, business. And then he said, and I worked with so many nonprofits, I learned that many of them don't know how to make business plans, and I'll be able to work with them pro bono and help them with their business plans. I was, oh my gosh, out of the mouth of kids. I
yeah.
realized I was so wrong, obviously, Linda, wasn't I? I mean, how
Yeah.
wrong can I be? That was
Mm,
100% wrong on the scale because I realized that we want people in all walks of life
mhm,
to be able to connect with all walks of life out in the world and bring what they have, their knowledge, their skills, their interests and talents, so that we elevate together.
mhm.
And I learned that in that moment. So I want people to be everything in the world, but know the word pro bono so they can go out and do the good work that needs to be done.
Well, and on that note, so there are many educators that are new to service learning or to service. What's one simple way they can begin, even tomorrow? Now, of course, whether it's tomorrow, the next day, but that they can begin to bring story and service together.
Several things. Look for books that you really love that bring the heart of the community inside your classroom. There's so many. Uh, and also connect with people who've been doing this. I mean, listen to Linda's podcast. She's going to be bringing on some other folks. And on my website, CBK Associates, I have lots of free resources that you can find. And I'm easy to find through the website at Kathy at cbkassociates.com. And you're welcome to write me and ask questions, and I can send you some resources. I have an article that I wrote about, it's a baker's dozen, guidepost for a meaningful service learning program. Unfortunately, that's not on my website, but you can email me for it. And I just love connecting with people who are getting started, and do get a copy of the Complete Guide to Service Learning.
Mhm.
It's a thick book, but it's very easy to read. It's a very friendly book with a friendly tone that answers your questions on how to get going and get started.
And in the show notes for this podcast, there is your website is there too for the listeners. So I do have a final question. When you think about the future of education, what do you hope educators will remember about the power of story, collaboration, and learning through service?
That we don't have to do this alone.
Mm,
And very often we think that learning happens in our private little classrooms, but that's just the beginning. That's where it starts. And the more we can open that door and that window, we can look outside and say, what's out there? The more we will feel supported as educators as well.
mm,
We all know people. Lindy, you were telling me earlier that you interviewed someone you knew from third grade. We all know people
mhm.
who have so many abilities that we can bring in. I was doing a huge program in North Carolina, and we were bringing in people to be storytellers, to read books to kids,
Ah,
which would be just wonderful.
mhm.
I mean, who do you know that would be wonderful to read a book about um, a runner, this fellow who was the oldest marathon runner in the world? Do you know someone who's a runner who would just love to come in and read that book to kids and talk about what running means to them? Do you know somebody who likes to cook who would like to read one of these fabulous books? If you look at, there's a wonderful publisher, Readers to Eaters. They have great books about food. Bring somebody in who's a chef or a cook who just likes food to read those books to kids. You're not in this alone. And the more we get to know people in our community, we're going to find ways that learning extends. And it could be the the fellow or woman who owns a corner store. It doesn't have to be someone who runs a big company. Just the everyday people in our community coming into our classrooms, or we going out to where they are, enriches who we are and who kids can become. I learned early on that without community connection, kids could go 12 years in school and the only real adults they know are teachers and their parents. And that's lovely, but that's not enough. It doesn't teach what it means to be an adult. So it's on us to connect kids with many, 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 many other adults from many walks of life, many levels of experience. The more we can do that and find story as the root of those connections, that will lead to meaningful service.
Thank you so much for that. Catherine, I'm sitting here thinking, going, thank goodness that our life journey connected. But it's been so many. I was teaching third grade at the time, which was many years ago. So I am very thankful that our life journey connected and definitely was able to still be a part of what you're doing. So thank you for everything. I also want to thank all the listeners for joining us on Moving Forward. Cathryn reminds us, though, that learning is not confined to the classroom. I hope that got across. It lives in our stories, our relationships, and our willingness to serve. I'm so glad you brought this up too. And listen. Listen, whether in schools, organizations, or communities, service becomes a powerful pathway to empowerment when it is rooted in reflection, shared voices, and purpose. So as you move forward from this conversation, consider this. Where might story open understanding? Where might service deepen connection? And whose voice is waiting to be heard in your classroom, your workplace, or your community? Thank you for being part of these conversations on culture, identity, healing, and hope. And until next time, keep listening, keep serving, and keep moving forward.